Well, let's start here with a look at the weapons each side gets as spawnables. It's rifles, semi-automatic rifles, submachine guns, and bazookas or Shreks. We don't get any squad machine guns, which we could use. Let's note the values of the flags here, and we'll start off with the Axis main or NAFI. It's a two-person to cap is the main thing on that particular flag. It's a 50-point flag. Of course, crossing is the big prize. It's worth 100, but crossing has no spawn points. Well, let's look at the cap zone for the Axis main here. Remember from part 1 that the cap zone sphere centers around the buildings here, kind of splits the buildings. So we probe the limits. It's actually a little smaller at the bottom because it's a sphere kind of sitting on the surface of the ground, a little bit into the ground, but not much, so it swells at the middle up higher. And that means, of course, that getting up high in the middle is where some of the cap zone action will be found. We look here, we can go up into the front flag zone building. See, we're always in the cap zone here. In the cap zone here, notice the indicator. You can see we go through the stairs, the door to the stairs, and it is still in the cap zone. We go around, we're out. Back here behind the wall here, it is not in the cap zone, but we get around to the side. So that's where some of that swelling of the sphere and the cap zone comes into play. Right at this location is in the cap zone. Well, this part of the building also gives a view to that area. Remember from part 1 where it was noted that the enemy would come up through the barracks buildings there and to where the half tracks are. Other approach is over on this side. There's some limited sight through that window, but main thing here is really the cap zone in the building. You see too that it's up at the top of the stairs and a little sliver of up here behind this wall can help get the cap. Well, the other side also has a cap zone touching the building and into the building, and we see here the indicator is always on. It's always on. You get back into this nacelle at the doorway, protected except from one direction, and are in the cap zone. Interestingly here, being on the ladder means you're in the cap zone, but once you're off the ladder, you're not. And so you can see this area here gives a really good view, but it does not give, when you're behind the wall anyway, access to the cap zone or put you in the cap zone. You have to get up on the ladder to actually be in it. Kind of an odd feature, but that's the way it was set up. Well, we can see that this rooftop too is a good observation platform. You could see enemy approaches from that side up to at least the areas that are not behind the buildings, and you can see pretty far into the forest. You can also see over on this side into the area behind the barracks buildings and the Quonset huts. Well, starting in the courtyard here, we'll look first at transportation. We see we have 2 Hanamegs over on the side, as everybody knows. We have 3 Opel trucks. We don't have any fast movers. In front of the building here are weapons kits. This is a shotgun kit, Russian rifle kit, a little dark here, sorry, but also the flamethrower. They're just right in front of the steps there. We got to get them. Inside is the machine gun rifle kit, FG42. And that's pickup kits for this particular flag. Now remember where we were looking at the cap zone. Well, this ladder gives access to the front cap zone building. You come right down the courtyard, get up that ladder, get into the building through that doorway, or up this ladder and get to areas that touch the cap zone. Going overhead now, we can see the relationship between the various buildings, how in fact the Axis main interacts with the other flags. As seen before, of course, we have the forest to that side, and we have the fields approaching the barracks buildings. You can see this is a similar view to what was in part 1, but a little bit slower. You can see some of the details with this particular view of what the enemy might use to give an approach. We could have an observer out in those buildings to be an early warning person who would spot the enemy soon and prepare the defenses or sound an alert, essentially. Also, the exits are here. There's the main exit right there for the main, often used for the vehicles to go out. We have to be careful where we set S-mines. If we decide to do that, we have to leave at least one area open for our own friendly vehicles to exit. Here we see the approaches to crossing. So copse of trees there, some woods that will provide cover and concealment on an approach if infantry company chooses to go that way. If you blow right up the road, you see basically you get into the area of the cap zone. If you remember from part 1, the sphere that goes there, it's kind of starting at those crates, roughly centering on the bridge. We have the wood fence on our side to provide a firing line. We have the one small building there that is partially in the cap zone. Directly across from it is, on the Allied side, the ruins building, the small ruins building, which is massively in the cap zone and a very important part of this particular flag. And they have their own wooden fence providing a firing line opposite ours. And this just shows some of the basic features of the area overhead view. Starting with an overhead view of crossing, we want to show the relationship between crossing and Uncle Abdul's. Of course, Abdul's is very close to crossing. Abdul's spawns troops. Abdul's is a fortified flag with buildings in the cap zone. It is oriented to defense from attacks coming from our direction, and it can be relatively quickly accessed from the Allied main. It has a fast mover, it has weapons kits, it will play a big role, maybe not decisive, but a big role in the battle for crossing and its 100 points. You can see that an attacker's path from Abdul's to crossing will very quickly get it to buildings, tents, and other cover and concealment structures. The one thing that you can note is that the ruins building on the Allied side of the river could provide a stronghold or redo for defenders defending against an attack from that direction. If we assume that as axis we will take mosque, we will see here that the relationship between mosque and crossing is not as favorable as that between Abdul's and crossing. Of course, that's apparent looking at the minimap, but here it just gives a good overhead representation of that particular fact about what the distance actually is like. Taking mosque may provide kind of a back flag status. It's harder to get to, it's more distant from them too, in a way, but it makes it harder and it takes longer to get reinforcements or just attacking forces to the crossing area from mosque, if that's going to be relied on with its resources. Well, we should look at the relationship between crossing and Allied main as well. It's a relatively straightforward drive from Allied main to crossing. They do have the roadblock and the chicanes to deal with on their drive. Probably find other ways around that, ways to shorten their time. But the vehicles are slow for both sides, until you get the fast movers anyway, and the times are maybe within 20 or 30 seconds of each other. Who spawns where in main at round start may be the most influential factor rather than the speeds of the vehicles or the speeds of the routes on this particular map. So you may get people getting there first, but maybe not unreasonably so. Here we see Allied main. If you remember part 1, the cap zone is in the villa building courtyard, and just on the other side of the wall there you can kind of see the general orientation of the Allied main base here.